No one inside that arena anticipated what was coming next, absolutely no one. All cameras were fixed on a single individual, the spotlights were set for one particular tale, and the whole planet had already decided the conclusion even before the opening point. Yet sports possess this harsh, magnificent way of tearing apart the planned storyline and shoving it right back in your face. On this specific evening, watched by millions across the globe, a 20-year-old girl from Manila named Alex stepped onto the most iconic tennis court on the planet and achieved something so unbelievable, so ridiculous, that even those who saw it live still find it hard to describe what unfolded. The rival waiting on the other side of the net was far more than just an excellent tennis player. He was Rafael Nadal, holder of 22 Grand Slam titles, a competitor who had crushed the spirit of every generation of athletes brave enough to face him on the court. A man who had recovered from injuries that would have finished most careers, not once, not twice, but several times. A player whose psychological toughness is so thoroughly recorded that sports psychologists actually study his matches as examples. That was the opponent Alex was walking out to confront, and the difference between them on paper wasn't merely large, it was an enormous gulf. Alex had barely made it into this event through qualification. There was no excitement when she showed up, no camera team trailing her in the changing area. No brands queuing up with big offers. She had qualified by the narrowest margin, and most reporters at the tournament had already shifted focus to more exciting storylines. She was simply a number beside a name on the draw sheet that nobody thought would advance deep. What those same reporters didn't realize was that Alex had spent her whole life getting ready for exactly this kind of being overlooked. Raised in Manila, she practiced on courts split down the center from years of intense heat and flooding. She trained right through typhoon season because improvement doesn't wait for perfect conditions. She spent 6 months sleeping on a friend's couch in Europe just so she could work with a coach who truly saw her talent. She had been turned away from training programs across the continent because her ranking wasn't high enough, her name wasn't known enough, and her background wasn't attractive enough for marketing. And every single door that slammed shut on her, she noted it carefully. She remembered every rejection, every courteous refusal email, every occasion when a more famous player walked by her in a corridor without even glancing at her. She wasn't resentful about any of it, she was constructing something stronger, and on the night the draw was announced and her name appeared opposite Nadal's, she didn't get anxious. She smiled, the same smile she had carried for years. The kind that only people who have faced endless doubt truly understand, the kind that comes when you've stopped being shocked by skepticism. The opening set unfolded exactly as everyone predicted. Nadal began dominating straight away. He targeted her backhand relentlessly, his signature move against everyone because that powerful topspin to the vulnerable side had destroyed champions for 20 years. He dragged her out wide. He forced her forward. He challenged her movement with perfectly placed drop shots that seemed machine-calculated. For the first 5 games, it appeared the expected story would stay on track. Nadal was clearly in charge, the audience supported him. Spanish flags waved everywhere. Commentators were already describing the match as a respectful but foregone conclusion. But here's the crucial observation nobody noticed in those early games, and this is what makes the entire story so captivating. Every time Nadal landed a winner, every time he forced a mistake, every time the point went against her, Alex didn't stare down at her shoes like players usually do when pressure builds. She looked at her racket strings, she readjusted her grip, and she smiled, not a fake, keeping calm smile. It was a knowing smile, the type that said, "I understand your strategy completely and I am already several moves ahead of you." She was studying him, collecting data instantly, analyzing his patterns the way a chess master studies an opening, and Nadal, to his credit, didn't pick up on it initially. Why would he? He had battled the greatest players for 20 years and none had ever truly broken him. Why would this 20-year-old from Manila be any different? The answer arrived at 4-4 in the first set, deuce on Nadal's serve. One single point that would later be shared so widely online it became almost impossible to trace the original video. Nadal played a drop shot. It was flawlessly executed, short with perfect backspin to make it skid and die near the surface. It was the kind of shot meant to make an opponent surrender the point without even attempting to chase it. Because by the time you realize what's happening, the ball is already gone. Alex ran. And she didn't just jog forward hopping for luck. She sprinted as if she had anticipated it before he even hit the ball. She reached it barely 2 inches from the net and whipped a lob so high and perfectly measured that it seemed to hang in the air forever. Nadal turned away. He stopped watching because it looked certain to land out. It didn't. It landed right on the baseline. Suddenly Nadal was rushing desperately. He somehow reached it and hit a panic smash. Alex was already positioned. She stepped inside the baseline, took the ball on the rise, and smashed a cross-court winner down the line that Nadal didn't even try to chase. The entire stadium fell completely silent. Not just quiet, dead silent. The kind of silence that happens when thousands of people witness something their minds cannot immediately comprehend. Then slowly the cameras captured something the internet has discussed ever since. Rafael Nadal, the most mentally unbreakable player of his era, glanced toward his coaching box with an expression no one in professional tennis had ever seen on his face before. Pure confusion, not irritation, not rage, confusion, like a man who had just witnessed something that didn't fit any understanding he had built over a lifetime mastering this sport. The second set was where the comfortable narrative began to break apart. The media, commentators, and viewers at home already had their backup story prepared. Talented underdog challenges a legend before losing with dignity. That was the expected tale, the one written and forgotten in a week, but Alex refused to follow that script. She won the second set, not because Nadal fell apart, not because he made mistakes. She won it by playing superior tennis, smarter, more accurate tennis. And when the second set tiebreak came, when the match hung on a knife's edge, when Alex trailed 5-4 with a match point against her, she executed something coaches will show in training videos for the next 20 years. She had spotted a subtle habit in Nadal throughout the match. A pattern, a tendency he had depended on since his teenage years, something so automatic in his game that it had become invisible to him, like how you don't notice your own accent. On big receiving points, he shifted slightly toward his forehand side just a tiny bit. Alex noticed it. Instead of playing it safe, instead of hitting deep and hopping for a mistake like every logical observer would have suggested, she attacked straight at his feet. A sharp, spinning backhand return that stayed so low and rushed so fast that Nadal had to stretch like a baseball catcher. His racket frame barely touched the ball. It sailed long, tiebreak over, second set to Alex. The crowd's roar in that moment was filled with confusion. Half of them didn't know who to support. They had arrived expecting one kind of moment and were witnessing something far greater. Nadal looked at the scoreboard. He shook his head, not in anger or self-frustration, but in something closer to amazement. This was the man who had defeated Novak Djokovic in 5-set finals, beaten Roger Federer at his absolute peak, and returned from a career-threatening foot injury to win another Grand Slam. Nothing had ever defeated him. And now a 20-year-old who had crowdfunded her travel costs on GoFundMe was staring at him with total conviction, and he could sense it. She had nothing to lose. He had everything to defend. The third set wasn't a simple breakdown. It was something deeper and more lasting. Alex played as if every training session, every cracked court in Manila, every rejection letter, every early morning practice where her family stayed up past midnight to watch her had all been leading to this exact moment. She didn't crack under pressure. She produced even better shots under pressure. Every time Nadal tried to seize control, she took it right back. Every time he used a tactic that had worked against every other opponent, she had the perfect response. And when the final point finished, when the ball hit the back fence and Nadal stood motionless, not even running because there was nowhere left to go, the stadium didn't cheer immediately. It exploded. Strangers in the stands were embracing each other. People were crying not from sadness, but because they had witnessed something sport rarely provides despite all its legends. A moment that felt truly impossible just seconds earlier. At Nike's headquarters in Oregon, executives watching the feed had a post-match campaign prepared around Nadal, classic, respectful, and ready-made. The instant Alex raised her arms, the head of global tennis marketing grabbed the phone and said 4 words, "Burn the old campaign." Within 20 minutes, Times Square was showing a new image. Alex's face, still covered in sweat, eyes fierce and intense, with one word below it, unstoppable. No background story, no ranking, no introduction, just that powerful statement. Nike placed her alongside LeBron James, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Serena Williams. They didn't wait for things to calm down, they crowned her instantly. And the sports world, which had treated her as a minor detail during the match, now had to face what that meant. But the moment nobody included in the highlight packages, the one that might matter even more than the tennis itself, happened as Alex was leaving the court. She paused, turned around, walked back to Nadal's bench, leaned in, and whispered something in his ear. Microphones didn't catch it, but after analysis, it wasn't a taunt. She looked the king of clay straight in the eyes and said, "Thank you for teaching me how to never give up." Nadal froze for the second time that night. Then he pulled her into a hug that lasted 10 full seconds, 10 seconds that felt like passing a torch between 2 different generations of the sport. When they separated, Nadal replied something. Lip readers caught it too: "You're not the future, you're the present." The reactions poured in fast and powerfully. Twitter crashed for 12 minutes. John McEnroe went on air and said he had watched tennis for 50 years and had never seen a power shift occur in one single night until now. A former world number one who stayed anonymous texted a reporter just 2 words: "She's different." In the locker room, as Alex walked in still shaking from the effort, every player stopped what they were doing. Not out of obligation, but because they felt the change in the atmosphere the same way you feel pressure drop before a storm. Veterans nodded in respect. Younger players stared. One Grand Slam champion who had beaten nearly everyone else in the draw walked straight up to her and said, "The pressure is yours now, don't drop it." Pressure, if only she knew. Alex had been carrying pressure since she was 10 years old, practicing in typhoon rain on cracked courts with wobbling net posts. She knew the pressure of her family watching at 3 a.m. their time, not wanting to miss anything. She knew the pressure of one bad event potentially ending her season because there was no money backup, no academy support, no rich sponsor. After the match, the skeptics did what they always do. They searched for excuses. They claimed Nadal was injured. They said he was past his best. They called it a fluke, a one-off night that wouldn't happen again. They held on to every explanation except the clear one. Alex was simply better that night, better prepared, better focused, and carrying something no ranking or age can measure: the total refusal to believe any ceiling exists. And then, while confetti was still falling, while Nike's campaign went live to 1 billion screens, while journalists wrote their headlines, Alex's phone vibrated. An unknown number. She opened it. Her face turned pale mid-sentence. The reporter noticed and asked if she was all right. She didn't reply because the message wasn't congratulations. It wasn't a sponsorship offer. It was an invitation to a private match. No cameras, no prize money, no ranking points, just pure tennis. And the opponent named in the message hadn't competed professionally in 3 years, a name that had vanished from the sport at its peak. No injury, no scandal, no announcement, just gone. One day the tennis world woke up and that player was no longer in any draw, completely disappeared. The message to Alex ended with 3 words that made her hand tremble: "Are you ready?" She placed the phone face down. The press conference ended early. She answered no more questions. She grabbed her bag, walked past her agent without looking at him, and locked the locker room door. She read the message again, then she did something unexpected. She deleted it. But she had already memorized every single word. That night, the hotel room felt too silent for sleep. The trophy sat on the minibar as if it belonged to someone else. Her phone buzzed again, this time a photo. Grainy black and white security camera image. A figure standing alone on a tennis court at 3 a.m. The court in the photo was the exact one in Manila where Alex had trained as a junior, the one almost nobody outside her childhood knew about. The figure wore a hoodie, but the posture was unmistakable. Racket held low, weight on the back foot. She called the only person she fully trusted Lolo Ben, her childhood coach. An elderly man who still trained kids on that same cracked court in Manila. It was 4 a.m. there. He answered on the first ring. Before she could explain, he said 8 words that took her breath away: "You saw it too." Alex couldn't speak. Lolo Ben stayed silent for a while, then shared a story he had never told anyone. 30 years ago, he had trained another prodigy with the same footwork, same intensity, and the same frightening ability to read opponents in real time that Alex possessed. That player had disappeared the night before their first Grand Slam final. No farewell, no explanation, just a handwritten note left behind: "The game is not what you think." Lolo Ben had always believed something terrible had happened, but now, seeing the photo Alex sent, he wasn't sure anymore. Alex hung up. She looked at the image again. The hooded figure was holding up a sign, handwritten. One sentence she could barely make out through the grain: "The real championship has no cameras." Outside her hotel window, a car engine started, stopped, then started again. She pulled back the curtain. The street was empty. But placed perfectly on the sidewalk directly below her window was a single brand new, unmarked tennis ball lying on its side as if deliberately left there. Alex stood at that window for a long time. The city was quiet. The trophy was behind her. Nike's campaign was playing on screens worldwide. Every sports channel was replaying her final point against Nadal in slow motion. None of it mattered in that moment. Because somewhere in the city, someone who was supposed to be retired was lacing up their shoes for the first time in 1,000 days. And Alex had a choice to make: stay in the spotlight, take the endorsement calls, do the interviews, become the face Nike had just shown to 1 billion people, or step into the unknown and discover why the greatest player anyone had ever seen quietly walked away from the sport they were born to dominate. The new face of tennis had been crowned that night. The entire world had witnessed it. But the real match, the one without cameras, without a crowd, without rankings or legacy to protect, that match hadn't even begun yet. And somewhere in Manila, Lolo Ben sat alone on a cracked court at 4 a.m., staring at a note he had carried in his wallet for 30 years, finally understanding what it truly meant.